A little after the Second World War, the UN was set up to see that such mishaps don't get repeated in the future. 2 years after the creation of the UN also started taking part in a tremendous number of developmental and activities that improved human indices across the world. In 1965, all these efforts came together to form the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program. I'm proud to be here today with Clement Chauvet, the Chief of Skills and Business Development for India and the UNDP.
Good morning.
Good morning. What brings a Frenchman born in Paris to India and to Turkey and to Philippines and all sorts of lesser developed countries when you could have done something else, when you could have done anything else at all?
I believe that what's important is it's to be able to wake up in the morning and know why you are going to work. So I took the decision, even when I was still in the business school, I knew that I wanted to work for the social sector. If I work for the UN system, it's because I believe in the value that the UN system is actually promoting. The value of human rights, the value of inclusion, the value of no one should be left behind. And especially right now, the UN is actually the one coordinating what we call the new development agenda, the one that started in 2015 with the Sustainable Development Goals. The new development agenda is all the countries in the world that actually fix themselves what should be the goal for the future. What do we want to see in the future? What is the world that we want to live in? No? And making sure that the world will be more equitable, the world will be more like we will be able to provide opportunity for everyone, that no one is going to be left behind, that we're going to live in a sustainable world where actually generation for the future can benefit from what exists today. So working for that development agenda, being sure that I can bring a little bit into it, I can actually bring my own participation into it, it's actually very important for me.
The popular perception across the world is that the UN has become irrelevant, because they view the UN from a very myopic view. People forget that there are so many other things attached to the UN than just the Security Council.
Yes,
and the General Assembly, which is more of a political game. But the UNDP, the UNICEF, the Food and Health Organization, Agricultural Organization, this tremendous amount of work being done by the UN, which is apart from simply that General Assembly in New York. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely for me. That the UN is huge. It's a family, no? As we call it generally, the UN family. And there are many different agencies. Each agency would have a kind of a specific mandate. UNDP is the one which has the larger mandate, and that focus on development program, and that's actually touch upon different kind of things, from renewable energy, sustainable living, to skill employment and entrepreneurship, to the system strengthening. But what for me is the main difference between the UN and the non-government organization. The UN is by definition a multilateral organization. We are not a non-government organization, we are a multilateral one. That means that as part of the executive board of UNDP or UNICEF is actually the member state of the United Nations. No? Meaning to say as well that our first counterpart in a country where we work is actually the government. We are here to actually be able to help the government and strengthen government programs so they can work better and they can make sure as well that they focus on the most vulnerable group. So we help government putting in place solutions, this program, scheme, that will make sure that the most vulnerable will benefit from the social welfare. And that's work that the UN is doing, NGO can't do. So what the UN does more and more, and this is what we do as part of our program, it's to become some kind of a catalyst or facilitator that bring many different stakeholders on the table so we can work together toward the same goal. And that's, I believe, what the UN can do. And the only organization in the world today that can do that, it's actually the United Nations, because the United Nations is, by definition, apolitical, is non-political, non-religious. It doesn't have any ties with any political party, with any kind of influence. And because we are actually quite independent, we can bring people around the same table and say, let's work together to find a solution for the same problem. And if we work together, we can actually make a difference.
But quite frankly, I mean, when you work with governments, aren't you still subject to political compulsions? Primarily, in a country like India, which is tremendously politically motivated.
Yes.
Yeah? Policies are politically motivated and motivated towards elections rather than actual good in the long term, in many cases. Now, I may sound like a cynic, but that is the reality on ground in many such cases. How do you actually work around these political quagmires?
But that's the reality. That means that, and the role that we have is to ensure that the program that we put together will be for the long term. Like, just to give you a few examples, we work as part of what I'm doing here for UNDP right now. We work for a project called Disha, which is funded by Ikea Foundation and work for women economic empowerment. No? So the idea for us is to make sure that we can provide more opportunity for women and girls so they can either find a job or start their own business. So what we are trying to do, for example, in Karnataka, but as well in other states, is to see how we can actually revive the idea of an employment exchange, because the employment exchange was created to do that. If it's not the mandate of an employment exchange, it's to do the matchmaking between the aspiration of young people and the requirement from the private sector. It's not working today because it has been run as a government agency and the private sector is not buying into it. But there might be possibility to actually change that situation and to make it work. To create, as I say, to create much more as a platform where everybody will actually be interested in working with that platform because they're going to get something out of it and they will be able to bring something to the platform.
In a country like India, there is that thing called cultural participation and traditions. You know, we are a country, especially in the rural areas, we are led by traditions and culture. And that can become a major impediment for you, because women going outside and working is, to some households, seen as a matter of insult.
Yes.
You know, like, it's terrible.
And it's a matter of insult, but it's also a matter of safety. And the safety is actually very important. And today, if the parents, they don't want to send their girls to be skilled or to get into a job, it's because they believe that it's going to be unsafe for them and an unsafe environment. No? We work, the idea is to work also with the parents and to work with the community, to make them understand that it could be a safe environment and to make them understand that at the end it's going to be beneficial not only for their girls but also for themselves. Just to give you an example, so we work, as I said, Ikea Foundation is the main funder of the program, Disha project that we have. But we work also with Ikea as a business. As everybody knows, Ikea just opened their store in Hyderabad a month ago or something. No? So what we did with Ikea as the business was actually to mobilize young girls from underprivileged background, government colleges, and mobilize them so they can be skilled on retail. And right now they are working actually on the retail shop that opened in Hyderabad for Ikea. 80 girls or so are coming from completely underprivileged background, will never have that kind of opportunity to actually work for that kind of brand, and they are right now working at customer relationship, cashier and others. No? All of them, for the 80 girls, most of them, what the parents wanted for them, it's actually to get educated, but just to get educated, not to get into a job. So they were in colleges, they had to continue and to be graduated, but most of the parents actually didn't want them to get a job because of the problem of safety, etc. So we work with the parents, we could convince them that it's IKEA, it's a safe environment, we show them video about what is it to be in the store of IKEA, what is it to be working there, explaining them what's the policy of IKEA in terms of gender responsiveness for the co-workers and other. And that changed a bit of their perception, but actually what changed the most, it's when the girls start really being hired by IKEA and start working on the factory floor and start receiving their first salary sheet and their first income. We are working on, especially as part of this project Disha, it's to work on this idea of a smooth transition between education, skill, job and growth.
80 girls. Now that may seem like a very little number.
Yes.
When you talk about the 50% of the population being women and a good population being the younger women. But it's a beginning. That's a great beginning. And assuming that at least 70 to 80% of them will continue working in spite of marriage. how are you expanding this program? Because Ikea can't be the only solution.
Another objective for us is to actually to create sustainable and replicable solution that could have an impact on the skilling ecosystem. And these solutions are public-private partnership component. No? So it's to work both with the private sector and with the government to create solutions where we believe that could have a much larger impact. So for example, what I was telling you, working to try to improve the capacity and the quality of the employment exchange, it's part of that solution. If we can work and make the employment exchange work for what they should be done, then in this case the scope is much greater than just 80 girls. It's the same, we work as well also on this idea of career guidance and counseling center, because most of the girls today in India, as the young people, even the young boys, they actually don't have a clue about what are the opportunities for them in the future. They don't know what they want to do. They don't even know what are their aptitude and preferences. If they know better about what they can do and what they want to do, then they're going to receive the appropriate skill for that. And then the private sector will find skilled workforce that correspond to their requirement. And if you do that, then in this case, there is a much better chance that private sector will be interested in getting them on board, and you create solution at scale.
As you said very correctly, even the younger boys in the rural paradigm really don't know.
Yeah.
And how is the UNDP looking at expanding? Disha is for women, I understand. But how is UNDP going to expand that program to include the boys as well?
So the idea right now, what we are looking at, it's actually to expand and scale up this solution in other places, in other states, with other partners and other donors, and as much for the boys than for the girls. We will still continue having a very strong gender focus and making sure that actually girls benefit at least as much than the boys,
or perhaps double so, yeah.
And even more.
Yeah. Well, we have been hearing about skill development for fairly long, but to the common masses, to people, even to educated people like me, if I may say so, skill is this ambiguous word.
Yeah.
What is it that you're training them on? While you say the private sector, it requires a certain kind of expertise to work there, or even in the government sector, what are those specific skills that we are talking about?
So for us, what we believe more and more is that at the end, the technical skills are important and should continue, but might not be the most important one. Do believe strongly that there are a set of skills that we call the transferable skills, and because transferable, because they can work from one job or the others, that might be much more important. And this is the idea of the 21st century skills. What we call the 21st century skills are a set of 4 main different categories. One in terms of digital skills, because that's in the world today. If you actually don't know how to use a computer or a phone, you're actually lost. In terms of the communication skills, and especially English, especially in India, English is actually critical to be able to work and perform in the workplace. And then there are 2 sets of skills after that, what we call the cognitive and non-cognitive skill. The cognitive is more problem solving, everything that deals with the project management, problem solving, another. While the non-cognitive skills are more everything that deal with social emotional intelligence, empathy, leadership, teamwork, and others.
What's your vision, Clement? Where do you see Disha, other projects, and indeed UNDP, private-public partnership and citizen participation in India a few years from now?
When I see that, I actually believe in one thing, it's actually collaboration. I believe that the problem of the world today, and especially the one in India, cannot be solved by one stakeholder. They can't be solved by the UN, they can't be solved by the government, they can't be solved by the private sector or even the NGO or anybody for that matter. The only way to actually solve them is that if we get together. And if we get together, if we at some point forget a bit about our own personal kind of agenda and try to work for what should be the future. And how do we create a sustainable future that will be inclusive and where no one is going to be left behind. So what I believe on is this creation of platforms. I believe that we should find a way to bring all the stakeholders around the same table and say, this is the problem that we have, and let's find the solution together. How can each of us bring something into it, bring what we know how to do, and that's all these pieces put it together is going to actually make a difference.
Great speaking to you, Clement, and looking forward to many more conversations like this. What this conversation has done is not only been a exchange of ideas between us, but hopefully reaching a far wider audience and act in the future as an inspiration of sorts, where corporate social responsibility moves far beyond corporate and moves into the realms of citizens' social responsibility. Thank you. Thank you very much.